Welcome into Jags Now, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some of my biggest takeaways from Jaguars OTAs. And we are in the second week of the OTA period for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there have been some notable storylines that have been building up, and fans are talking about it. I wanted to give my 2 cents on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And before we jump in here, guys, we are on the road to 3,000 subscribers, less than 150 subs away. Is it possible we can get it on this video? I know you guys are some of the best fans in the National Football League. Show it by hitting that subscribe button. It's completely free. Tell you what, set a reminder 1 week from now, and if you don't enjoy the content, you can unsubscribe. No pain to you. Just hit that sub button if you enjoy all things Jacksonville Jaguars. All right. The biggest takeaway, I think it's been pretty unanimous, whether you follow any Jaguars beat reporters on Twitter, whether you're somehow viewing any of the OTAs in Jacksonville, Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence. The connection is growing, and Brian Thomas Jr., his confidence, it seems to be regaining after a down year in 2025. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear what Liam Coen had to say about the former LSU product. He had this to say about Brian Thomas Jr. so far in the offseason program. We're being a little bit more intentional about usage and chemistry with him this spring and trying to get a true connection we didn't quite have last spring or last training camp. I've been very pleased with how he's taken the things that we've asked him to do to get better at and be intentional about those reps. You love to hear that from a coach, and you love to hear that about a player. And, I thought Zane Dahani, who does some analytical stuff on Twitter, he had a really good tweet kind of summarizing Brian Thomas Jr. and what his potential role could be for this upcoming season. He had this to say on a tweet. A lot of info on how impressive Brian Thomas looks. Most notably, Jaguars are throwing it deep a ton, and Brian Thomas Jr. is the one on the receiving end of that. Signals to me that he's still the vertical threat, as we've seen in previous posts, talking about just some of the clips that have been circulating online. It seems like every other day, Brian Thomas Jr. is breaking one over the top. And we talked about it on a previous video. The Jaguars want to have more of a vertical downfield game this upcoming year in their offense, and Brian Thomas Jr. would be the perfect guy to really implement that, because in his rookie campaign, he was a deep threat that really utilized his speed and was able to take the top off of the defenses wherever Jacksonville was going up against. It just, for whatever reason, didn't click in year one in Liam Cohen's offense this past year. We've talked about, is it a confidence thing? Is it simply just, I wasn't necessarily sure how he fits in schematically? I think whatever the reason is, it was too early to give up on BTJ. And having a peak Brian Thomas Jr. in this offense would be an absolute game changer for the Jacksonville Jaguars, because he, to me, while I do think I have more confidence in Parker Washington being the Jaguars wide receiver 1 for 2026, if you're asking me, hey, Cullen, which wide receiver has the biggest potential in terms of maybe even reaching NFL superstardom as a wide receiver? If anybody, it would be Brian Thomas Jr. His athletic profile, his pedigree coming out from LSU, his ability to run the route tree with his physical capabilities. There's just no one else like that on the Jaguars receiving core, and I think if he puts it all together, things can be really special in Duval County. That being said, we just kind of briefly mentioned him. Parker Washington, it just seems to be a theme at this point in Jaguars offseason programs. He's dominating, and he's having another hell of an offseason with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll talk about him and where I think he is headed in terms of this offense and overall projection for 2026 here in just a moment. But we would not be able to do today's show if it wasn't for our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. The playoffs are here for basketball, baseball is underway, and it's time to cash in with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app and is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida, and the app is super easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. And always make sure you take advantage of max discounts. We've got one for the Basketball Championship Series. Game 1, Jalen Brunson. Take the more on his half a point. And I'm going to take the more on De'Aaron Fox, 4.5 assists. I think he's going to get his teammates involved. Little two-player lineup, $10 to win 22 here for some hoops action. And again, we've got a new user offer for you guys. Download the Prize Picks app today, the link in the comments and the description, and use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So Liam Coen also spoke about Parker Washington, what he's seen from the former sixth-round pick in just terms of his evolution as an NFL wide receiver. Liam Coen had this to say. Oh, man, he's done a nice job this spring so far. I guess a lot of people in the way you look at maybe his stats of the season and the late surge and doing what he did in the second half of the season, and I thought we saw some flashes. You look at Cincinnati early in the season where it really came on, and then he just consistently of the dominating presence that he was towards the end of the season, the things that he was able to do for both of us, for both in the slot and the outside for us. And, later in that quote, Sleeper NFL aggregated this. Uh, Liam Coen was also quoted saying that he wants to expand Parker Washington's role in 2026, that he wants to, run a more diverse route tree with Parker Washington, getting touches through screens, jet sweeps, and downfield routes. And I think it's pretty obvious to say at this point, but just to reiterate, this staff clearly trusts Parker Washington and his just kind of overall work ethic, his development as a wide receiver, and just his skill set and what he could provide for Trevor Lawrence and this offense as a whole. And he's had a steady progression throughout his NFL career in terms of, came on as a sixth round, day three rookie. He wasn't going to contribute much as a rookie. He only had 132 receptions, but you see the stats on screen. He just, consistently year by year gets a little better, a little better. And as Liam Coen alluded to, and we've talked about on the show, he had so much production that last month of the season where he really, he was a game changer for the offense, and they needed it so badly in Jacksonville with Brian Thomas Jr. kind of going through his slump. Jacoby Myers wasn't quite the boost that he was after the trade. So I just think that Parker Washington has all the momentum and that he's going to carry that in 2026. But it's no shocker that he's dominating another offseason. Guys, fill in the blank for me. I'm curious, and I want to hear your guys' projection. Parker Washington will have blank number of receiving yards in 2026. If I had to guess, I'm going to say around, not to give a round number because that would be too easy, I'm going to say 1,132 receiving yards in 2026. I think he takes another jump up and becomes a 1,000-yard receiver in the National Football League. I truly think he has that kind of potential. Speaking of potential, Buster Brown. And it's kind of ironic we're talking about a cornerback given how much Brian Thomas Jr. and Parker Washington have stood out. But Buster Brown has also had some standout moments at the cornerback position where the Jaguars, they made it a point to extend him before the start of free agency, and he is rewarding them with some good play so far in OTAs. Demetrius Harvey, who does work for the Florida Times-Union, I thought had a really good write-up in terms of where the Jaguars were sitting during this OTA period, and he had this to say about Montaric Brown. So far during OTAs, Brown has proven himself to be a reliable, looking sticky in coverage on multiple occasions, including against Washington at times, throughout the two media-attended practices. One difference with Brown this offseason, it appears he's added more muscle, which is something the entire secondary worked on this offseason in an effort to get bigger at those positions. And, the Jaguars really need Montaric Buster Brown to be that reliable outside corner because with Travis Hunter expected to not only have a role on defense, but also on offense this upcoming season, like we've talked about, Montaric Brown really has to be that outside dependable corner alongside him because, Travis Hunter, given his extra, duties on the offensive side, you might see Jarring Jones or Christian Braswell, or maybe some others, get some snaps alongside Montaric Brown on the outside. And I think last season, he really proved his worth in Anthony Campanelli's defense, who was back again as the Jaguars defensive coordinator. You see the stats on screen. Only allowed a 54% completion percentage, had 12 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, allowed a quarterback rating of 73.5. I think Montaric Brown, he needs to be as reliable as he was in 2025, in 2026 for this Jaguars defense to work. And there is some shakeup. Hopefully, Jordan Lewis can also stay healthy and be that slot corner that you signed in free agency and that you're hoping he can be for this team. But if he is your, consistent kind of cog with Antonio Hamilton, expect to take another step at safety, Eric Murray stepping in for Andrew Wingard, who left in free agency, there's going to be a lot of shifting around in the secondary. If Montaric Brown can be that kind of essential core piece that is just steady and you can just, hey, you know what, outside cornerback, we don't have to worry, about Montaric Brown. It's only going to be good things for this Jaguars defense in 2026. Another takeaway, going back to the offensive side of the ball now. Bhayshul Tuten, his second-year leap is coming. He is going to be, I think, one of the more explosive breakout candidates amongst NFL running backs. And, he was asked whenever he spoke to reporters in terms of, kind of what his expectations were. He talked about Travis Etienne leaving for New Orleans in free agency and how much, of a mentorship role he was for him last season, but he even acknowledged like the increased role, which we all kind of knew, but he even acknowledged it, saying, "My role increased here. I just got to step up to it." And he's not denying it. He's not running away from the fact. And I really do think that, he's got this explosive home run hitting ability that can really change a game. And even in that playoff game against the Buffalo Bills, he only had, a handful of touches. I think it was like around 8 touches in that game, but he had like 90 something yards. Like he is just somebody that the moment the ball hits his hands, he is a threat to take it the distance. And you see the stats on screen. He wasn't the bell cow by any means. That was it, Travis Achan last year. But with an increased role and with Chris Rodriguez still not being at OTAs, I think Bhayshul Tuten's a clear winner here, that he's getting these extra reps in OTAs, and that, he's really taking a reins in terms of being that RB1 that Jacksonville kind of desperately needs him to be in order for this offense to really thrive. And we understand how much Liam Coen values the running back position and being able to feed the play action pass game off the run game itself. So if Bhayshul Tuten can keep putting in these good practices, everything so far has been good for the former Virginia Tech Hokie. I'm really excited to see what Bhayshul Tuten can do in his second season. And finally, Josh Hines-Allen, after missing that first week of OTAs, he stepped on the field Monday in the second practice available to the media, and he looked like he was in midseason form. Multiple beat reporters for the Jacksonville Jaguars quoted Josh Hines-Allen as the best player on the field, and on any given Sunday, right, he can be the best player on the field. So this is not a shocker by any means for Jaguars fans, and I think Josh Hines-Allen is a legitimate number one edge rusher in the National Football League. Trayvon Walker was highly complimentary after he got his extension. He spoke to the media and said this about Josh Hines-Allen: "We want each other to be great." And that's the way that it should be between two edge rushers. And, a lot of people were talking around NFL circles after the huge, well, technically there was two multiple huge trades, but the defensive trade between the Los Angeles Rams and the Cleveland Browns about, Myles Garrett going over to Los Angeles. I mean, it was a groundbreaking trade. Everyone's picking the Rams to go to the Super Bowl. This was one of the graphics that was kind of circulating around social media in terms of like most pressures, because Myles Garrett, the reigning defensive player of the year, I mean, he's an animal, right? He's, had 161 pressures. But I thought it was noteworthy that Josh Hines-Allen had 147 pressures. That's ranked fourth in the National Football League. If he can just consistently, hit home and be able to get after the quarterback, because Jacksonville, while they were, naturally one of the better teams in terms of generating pressures, they weren't able to finish those pass rush reps. Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, those guys are going to need to play up to their potential if the Jaguars defense hopes to, regain and retain their level that they established in 2025. That'll be it for today's video, guys. Those are some of my biggest OTA takeaways. Let me know what you thought of the Jaguars OTA period so far through these, 1.5, almost 2 weeks that we've gone through here. And again, guys, if you enjoyed the content we're putting out on the channel, hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 3,000 subscribers. Hit that sub button. We greatly appreciate it. Until next one, guys, we'll see you. Peace